sponsor for this episode is MTO Commercial and Residential Cleaning Services. MTO has been, still is, and always will be a locally owned and operated company. Paula started MTO in 1994 and has been serving Harvey County residents ever since. If you're looking for a one-time clean or a weekly, bi-weekly, or a monthly spruce-up, no need to worry. MTO gives free estimates. Give Paula a call at 316-288-9141. That's 316-288-9141. Welcome to this episode of Harvey County Talk. I'm your host, Lance Gormley. Our guest on the program today is Rick Piepho. Rick is the Harvey County Clerk and Elections Officer and has been for quite a few years now. Yeah,
since I was appointed in 2014.
Okay. And
been in the office since 2011.
Well, thanks for coming on the program again. I'll have to say, if you look back into our archives in Harvey County Digital and Harvey County Talk, you'll see that Rick did come on the program before one time. And, well, because I was new and novice, I'll have to admit, didn't come out the best, right? And now that we've progressed forward and we've done a lot of things and I've learned a lot of things, Rick has agreed to come back on the program so we can give him the 5-star service this time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just want to say going into this, I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate that you serve our community. And this is just going to give everybody an opportunity to get to know Rick a little bit better. Those of you that don't know him, or maybe even those that do, a little bit something else that you knew about him now you didn't know before.
Right.
And then just to tell us, what your official capacity is, and just walk us through who Rick is from the beginning to today. So I got to ask, who is Rick? Where did Rick grow up? Where were you born, Rick?
I was born in Topeka, actually.
Okay.
But my dad was in the military, so for 20 years, or he was in the military for 20 years, so we moved around a lot. Lived in Denver for a while, lived in North Dakota for a while, lived in Missouri for a while, ended up back in Kansas when he got stationed at McConnell. I graduated from high school from Derby High. Went to Pittsburgh State University with a 4-year degree in printing management, and I ran a printing and direct mail company in Hutchinson for 25 years. And part of that job involved dealing with campaigns for candidates, and so I was already familiar with voter registration databases and getting into elections, and also in that capacity. Our printing company actually worked with printing the ballots for Harvey County.
Okay.
For all those years. So I lived in Newton the whole time, drove back and forth to Hutch every day. So also as part of the customer service is I would help the county clerk on election nights with tallying ballots, and so I've been involved with elections and ballots for pretty much that whole time period. And then when an opportunity came up in 2011 that the deputy clerk was leaving, and it was just time for me to make a change, so I talked to the clerk at the time about taking over that position and learning how to be the county clerk, so that when she left, that possibly I would be available for that job. And so I was, because I'm a big fan of on-the-job training and knowing every part of the job before you take the job.
Yeah.
So I was her deputy for 3 years until she retired, and then I was appointed or elected by the precinct committee people of the party to take over when she retired, and then I was on the ballot, or that was in 2014, and then I was on the ballot and elected outright in 2016 and again in 2020.
Okay, so just kicking it back a little bit, you're involved in the process. Well, I mean, I want to go back even farther, Rick. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. So you're married, have kids?
I am. I have 2 sons.
Okay.
They're from her previous marriage, but and then 5 grandkids.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
lived here in Newton ever since I got out of college, pretty much. Well, I lived in Halstead for a little while.
Okay, what brought you to Newton? Just what? Just attractiveness of the greatness of the city?
Well, I started out after college. I went to work in Halstead for a direct mail company that was starting up there and ran their printing operation, and then met my wife there. She's from Newton, so that's how I'm in Newton.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, you got to move to where the love of your life is, and be that support. And you can't really ask her to move to Halstead. There's at the time probably not a whole lot going on in comparison to what's going on in Newton on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, she lived in Halstead for a little while she was working there. But.
So you're Newton. I would call you a transplant then, right?
Yes.
You transplant to Harvey County. And then, so it's interesting how you were in a vein that was that dealt with what you do now, but not directly. So when you're operating on a level of like a printing press, like what you're talking about in Hutchinson, and then mailers maybe and printing and even ballots, is there a lot of state regulation and laws that go into that as far as you being the printing company and making sure that things are the way they're supposed to be? Or how did that pique your interest?
Well, as far as for candidate campaigns, there's campaign finance laws and stuff, but we would help them with directing their image and postcards and, how competitive their race is on how many mail pieces they needed to do. And we would do, local campaigns, state campaigns. But from the ballot side, it was a matter of we were an approved vendor for printing those ballots for the company that they were utilizing.
Okay.
And the ballot stock itself would come from the main equipment vendor, and then we would put the candidates and the ovals and stuff on there. And but like I said, we had to go through and a process to be approved to do that.
Interesting. So even then, there's a lot of technicalities that go into that.
There's a lot of technicalities that go into
it. You can't mess that up
because there's multiple ballot styles. People may not be familiar, but each precinct or every overlay where there's a state race or a local race, there's different precincts. So each precinct has its own ballot style, which the candidates may be rotated separately, or there's different candidates, like in this upcoming election. Well, it's a city school election this year. So people in the cities will vote for city races, whether it be mayor or council or both, and then also school board races. But if you live outside of a city, you're only going to have school board candidates.
Okay.
And there's rotation involved, candidate rotation. So we currently, in this election, I think we'll have 52 ballot styles.
Okay. So even if I'm living in my residence, when I get my ballot, the order of the individuals that are listed 1 through 5, let's say, could be different for somebody living in the same household with me. It might be 3 is 2 and 1 is 5.
Not in the same household. It's rotated by precinct. Everybody in an A precinct is going to have the same ballot.
Okay.
But your neighboring precinct may have those same candidates, but in a different order.
All right.
It's designed to give each candidate an opportunity to be at the top of the ballot.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, just
and
fairness.
on a equal as we can make it.
Yeah.
Number of ballots.
Very interesting. So you decided that when an opportunity came open here in the community, then you moved over to you were hired on as the deputy clerk and elections officer for Harvey County.
And my main duty as deputy was handling elections.
Okay. So, and then who was that at that time? Did you mention that person's name just to give them a shout out?
Joyce Truscott.
Okay. So then got Rick on the team, and you were predominantly focused in on the elections part of it, which is a huge task, I can tell you. I'm sure that's so amazing.
And I had also worked with the previous clerk before Joyce, Margaret Wright.
Okay. So both of these individuals, we can send a shout out to them and say thank you for training and bringing up Rick and what he knows how to do, what he knows how to do.
Margaret passed away a number of years ago.
Okay. Yeah, well, sorry about that, unfortunately. Okay, so you've been trained by these individuals. you're moving into this position, an opportunity came open for the current clerk to resign, and then you put your name in the hat. Did you kind of at that point have a feeling like you knew enough about the job that you felt like you probably were the best individual to take that role on and carry us into the future?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the process, was learning the job, not just the elections, but I learned the tax roll side, because the clerk doesn't just do elections. We do a lot of other functions. But to me, that was really important, to learn the job and be the most qualified. And I don't think anybody else would have had the qualifications that I had.
And then speaking of that, when, what exactly, just for anybody listening that knows different facets of your job, of how they come in contact with you. Like if I'm registering to vote, I may very well come in contact with Rick or somebody that works in Rick's office. But if I'm not involved in any other things that Rick does, it's very easy for me to think, well, Rick is just responsible for when you go up there to do something with your registration. So what does, I know, because for the audience, I interned with Rick. He was gracious enough during my time when I was getting my education in the Bachelor's of Political Science to let me come up there and just learn about the job. And what I learned most about the job is, wow, this is a job. We are not talking about anything simple here. There would have been no way in that period of time that I could have even done anything more than scratch the surface and have a good base knowledge of what you do. But as far as in-depth stuff, so just run me down the list. You are the clerk. So what does the clerk do?
Okay. I guess I'll start out with there really is no equivalent job in the private sector. So it's one of those that's hard to get pre-trained, I guess, to step into this job, because there's so many hats that we wear, or I wear. Elections is just part of it. I didn't bring the whole list of all the things, but I think, the county clerk is mentioned in statute like hundreds of times. Yeah. We do things like, I attend all the commission meetings. I'm in charge of recording or writing their minutes. We do all accounts payable, so we pay all the bills. We maintain the tax roll, which means that we are the ones that basically we set the mill levies. And we maintain, the appraiser sets the appraised value. We assess values. So we take the appraised value times the assessment rate to calculate your taxes. And then we accept all the budgets from all the entities and use those budgets with the valuations to calculate the final mill levies, and then apply that to the tax roll. So we create all of the tax statements that you get in the mail. Those are all created from our office. They're mailed out, and the payments are accepted by the treasurer, but we do all those calculations.
Okay.
And then we just got done with doing what's called a revenue neutral rate estimated tax notice. You probably just got yours in the mail last week. That's a new one. It's been in the last couple of years that we have to calculate the revenue neutral rate for an entity, which means that it's the rate based on the new valuation, total valuation, the highest mill levy rate that they could assess to get the same exact tax dollars that they got the last year.
Okay.
If they want to go even $1 more taxes levied than they did last year, then they have to exceed the revenue neutral rate. They have a hearing, and that's what this notice is about, is to tell you on your property how all of the entities that are in your tax unit are going to affect your taxes.
Yeah.
So it does all the calculations for you and says, okay, your property's worth this much, here's the taxes, here's what the proposed rates are, and gives you all the hearing date and times, which have been published in the paper, but this puts it in your hands.
Yeah.
And if you want to attend those hearings, all the information is on there.
Yeah, well, makes it rather simple.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, you get it, and it shows you exactly how the breakdown. I call it the breakdown, and then at that point, it gives you the opportunity to go and contest.
They're a little confusing because it's really comparing the revenue neutral versus proposed. it also shows you your prior year, and you really should look at the prior year versus proposed, because revenue neutral is it's difficult for entities to stay with the exact same dollars they got the previous year. I mean, without making cuts, and but also in our office we sell boat licenses, hunting and fishing licenses. We help some residents with their homestead tax claims. Trying to think of some of the other things that there's. It seems like I'm always changing hats. I'll have one phone call that's tax, and then go to elections or fish and game, or there's just a lot of duties, and pretty much like it seems like every miscellaneous duty we get tasked with a lot of those.
Yeah, you're the all-in-alls. Yeah.
And we're the go-to. If you got a question, ask us first, and we'll try and get you to the right place.
Yeah. If you just need to call Rick's office for any of your needs or questions, and they'll send you in the right way.
Try and get you to the right place.
I love it. So you went through the clerk's portion, and then when I interned, I focused a lot on the elections portion, and so that even in of itself is a big task. That is, it's a monstrosity of an event. It's like you're planning for a wedding every year, and having to execute consistently on time, with everybody's rights involved and everybody. It's a big deal. But so venture me off into that portion of your job.
Okay. Elections is a important part of our job, my job. But it's not the one that takes most of my day-to-day activities. Other than during election seasons. But what was it? I don't know. There's a lot of things that happen day to day on elections. We get new voter registrations, advance applications. So we maintain the voter registration database year round. People register online or on paper or whatever. Like I said, we process all those. In the off season, we also do maintain the tax roll as far as address changes. We get an NCOA list every year, National Change of Address list every year that's compared against the database. And we send out notices to those people that have changed addresses. And so it's a constant job of maintaining the registration database. As we get closer to elections, and I have to create a calendar that basically says, okay, here's all the dates. You have to do publications on these dates, have ballots ready on these dates, and of course, before every election, it just starts ramping up. So election day is not just election day for us, even before and after. We start sending out ballots 45 days before every election to overseas and military voters.
Okay.
So everything has to be ready at least 45 days ahead of time so that we can start sending out ballots. And then as we get closer, we have voter registration deadlines 21 days before. We start mailing advance ballots 20 days before. We start early voting in the courthouse 14 days before, and always on the Saturday right before every election. We have candidate filings, which is June 1st every year. So it depends on exactly the timing of the year as to how involved we are in elections. But then there's also, I think the point I was going to make that I forgot, and I paused a little bit, was that the legislature chose way back when the state started that the clerk was in 101 out of the 105 counties. The county clerk is the election officer, 4 largest counties have an election commissioner that's separate from the clerk. But the legislature determined that the county clerk would be the election officer, along with their other duties. Well, it turns out that now revenue neutral basically has to be done around August 1 is when the statements go out. Well, guess what? We normally have an election. We didn't have one this year, but primary elections are the first Tuesday in August. The tax roll, I said that the treasurer mails out the statements. Well, the tax roll is due to the treasurer November 1. Guess what? We have an election every first Tuesday following the first Monday in November every year.
Yeah, yeah.
So
timing is everything.
Our Octobers and
August or something else,
right,
huh?
yeah. But, so and then there's always discussions about elections. Working on the processes involved with, check-in, check-outs, all the other stuff, all those processes, training materials in the off-season. Those are some things that I work on when I'm not doing other tax-related stuff. But
Well, so this is just a consistent cycle. What I'm hearing you say is either one or the other. You have high, like you might be swamped with your clerk duties and not so much elections official responsibility, but then all of a sudden it flips.
Or
and
both.
This is a year. Yeah, now you're saying it's like even more complex. And it's like anything when it comes to you're not saying this I am, but anything that comes with any kind of legislation, usually it happens, and then those of us that are here on the receiving end of it get to figure out how to deal with that.
Correct.
So that probably opens up a whole nother can of worms when it comes to how you manage your office, manpower, the whole thing. So not only are you doing these two things simultaneously, you're like the all in all for your department. You're a department head.
I am a department head.
Who is an elected official.
Correct.
So that makes it even more complex, right? So you got into the job, okay, not to take a turn on you here, but how do you, looking back when you got in, you knew that you probably had a better grasp of another individual who might be able to do the job or wanted to do the job. How much of a learning curve has that been just in over time, or what you thought you knew that you didn't know, from technology changes to where we are today? Like,
Well, I think being in the job for a couple years was very helpful, because, like I said, there is no private sector job that is similar, that you can go out and say I'm a CPA or whatever. I mean, it doesn't equate to what we do. There's parts of it that are done in the private sector, like printing ballots. That was something I did for them. But I learn something new every day, and or a new question comes up, and like, okay, I have to get myself, versed in cereal malt beverage or whatever it is, cereal malt beverage license, which is another thing we do. So and a lot of things that are done in my office are only done once a year. Like the tax roll only comes up once a year. I mean, actually calculating and creating the tax statements. So these are things that you need to be in there and learn by doing, basically, and or with training. There are trainings that are offered through the Secretary, or some trainings on election stuff through the Secretary of State's office. Our association has a clerk certification program that I've gone through. I'm a certified county clerk, and then on top of that, I'm now a certified master county clerk.
okay,
So there's an original 3-year program you go through, and then after that, it takes another 4 years to become a master clerk, and I've been a master clerk for a number of years.
and that maybe just has to do with all of the things that gives you enough time to go through this cycle so often that now you're able to just be able to help somebody who might not be. I mean, it.
Right.
You know it.
And now I've been in it long enough that I help mentor newer clerks.
Okay.
So, I mean, we don't have an official mentorship program, but we rely on each other to help each other do our jobs.
Coming on to this question, I know that there's a political side to your job because obviously you have to be elected, but you're not really. I mean, it's kind of weird. You're not out here making policy like most elected officials are doing.
Correct. I mean,
That's what county commissioners, city commissioners, school board members, a lot of them are policy makers. In your elected official capacity, it's not so much that way. So I don't understand, like, when I'm just digging deep here, inner politics, because you have to run for an office. You said you had to get put on a ballot to be able to run for an office. I can't think of anybody, just knowing your situation to get into the meat of this, that because it could even compare to do what you do at this point in time. So then you still have to deal with the fact that somebody might say or think you're not doing a good job and run against you.
Absolutely. In smaller counties like us, which actually we're considered a bigger county on the election side, but the job here, unlike some of the large counties, is a working job. I mean, I am personally involved in tax roll calculations. I rely on my staff to do a lot of things, but we have a small staff. My office is a total of 4 people, including me. So I have to do a lot of day-to-day work. It's not just a figurehead or management position. And the elected part of it is more about the checks and balances, and or, that there's a lot of election duties that it's my decision, like buying election equipment. I mean, the county commission sets my budget, but they don't get to decide like how many polling places we have, or I consult with them, but it's more about checks and balances, and it's a checks and balances to the treasurer's office, who's also elected. Not so much about policy, but in my position, even though it is a partisan position, I feel as being an election officer that I need to run my office in a nonpartisan manner, because I don't want it to be viewed that I'm skewed towards one way or the other, or helping one party over another.
Like, oh, you're a Republican, that means Republicans will always win, Rick. That's what you're elected to do, right? I don't know. That's very self-serving in and of itself. But your job is ultimately to make sure that every individual has the right, the ability to go to a place and cast their ballot without any hiccups, let's say.
And that their ballot is going to be counted no matter how they voted.
Yeah, regardless. It's not important to you how they voted, in as much as the fact that their vote is counted.
Usually on election nights, I'm more worried about making sure everything balances. I rarely look at the actual outcome of the races, who's winning and who's losing, because it's more about making sure all the votes are counted. And then whoever wins they'll rightfully have won. As long as we count them all.
And that's pretty amazing that you get to be the individual to make sure that we get to elect you to make sure that happens. And so speaking of this, I know, having been involved in politics, right, and in policy, obviously, advocating for policy changes or things, and I heard something shortly after I was interning for you, that there was this, it seemed like a push to change a policy that you can't really change, that had something to do with elections equipment and how people vote. And I just remember from the time that I was there with you that there was a push for individuals to want to just go completely away from electronic equipment. We had this conversation before. Anybody listening probably is aware of that this conversation happened in our community. But you can't actually do that, because the law states on a federal level that you have to have something for people that need this way to vote.
Correct. You have to have at least one handicapped accessible or ADA machine per polling place.
Okay.
And all of our equipment, all of our devices are equipped in that manner. So if you're hard of hearing or visually impaired, whatever, especially for visually impaired. There's headphones and a keypad so you can hear the whole ballot and vote without assistance. In our county, we've chose to, a long time ago when the first round of equipment was purchased after HAVA, which all happened after the Hanging Chad thing in Florida, Bush v. Gore, is when all of this started at a federal level. But so even the previous equipment, we had the equipment for the handicapped accessibility. But the previous clerk had determined that not only would the machines be available for those that are handicapped, but we would make them available for ease of voting for voters that choose to vote that way. So since then, like 2006, we've offered every voter the opportunity to just choose, do you want to vote a paper ballot that's printed and you fill in the oval with a pen, or do you want to vote on a machine? And it's pretty consistently been about 50% vote machines and 50% vote paper ballots, traditional paper ballots. When we purchased new equipment last year, beginning of last year, I brought some proposals to the commission, and we chose to continue that practice of having enough equipment that people would still have that option. And it's actually pretty much stayed the same. Our new equipment actually prints out a paper ballot that looks just like the one you would have filled out if we'd have handed you a ballot and you filled it out with a pen. It looks exactly like it. It's just it prints out what the oval's already filled out. And the new equipment does not, if you're voting on that machine, it does not store your vote in any way. It's a ballot marking device. And then it goes into another piece of equipment to be scanned. All the ballots, whether they're filled out by hand or on the machine, go into another piece of equipment to be scanned and tallied to figure out which oval was filled in and which candidate was voted for.
And I like that. Me personally, if you're asking my opinion, I appreciate that you did that. I like the technology. I like to be able to go in there, hit the button first time. I think I did it the last time. It came out. I saw it, put it in the little zipper machine, and it counted my ballot. And I thought, man, I really appreciate the fact that there's somebody working to make this more effortless. Yeah. And I don't mean that, but with my love of politics and passion for that, I wish more people were participatory in the voting process. But absolutely, you do a wonderful job of making sure that people can have access to early voting. There's plenty of opportunity. You can even come in on a Saturday. You can, ultimately, you can sign in for a mail-in ballot and just do that, right? Yep. So your goal in the end is just to make sure that everybody who wants to vote can, that it's made simple enough that there's no obstacles in the way for people to not want to go vote, and then ultimately that our elections are secure.
Correct.
Would that be okay? So election security, all right? How do we shape up? I know that there have been times in the past when you've done presentations for those machines, new machines, old machines, all the machines, everything, very informative, try to educate the public on what's going on. And I think at one point in time, I heard a rumor that that those new technology in counting ballots is even more accurate than a human being able to do it.
Yeah,
Has that happened of the test runs or anything?
That has really always been true. If you look at any studies, hand counting ballots is the least accurate way to count ballots. Okay. We kind of proved that. I don't know if you're familiar, but last year in the primary, there was some counties that were tasked with auditing either the state treasurer's race or the value of them both amendment. It just so happens that Harvey County was chosen to audit both races.
Oh, wonderful.
We were the only county that did both races.
Yep.
And in that process, so there we hand counted, had brought in boards, nonpartisan or bipartisan boards to hand count the ballots to compare to the results from election night. So there was one instance where, and I'm not involved in that process at all. I just give them the ballots, say sort them out. You're going to count this race. And they have the power to, if there's a ballot that there's 2 X's across the ovals, but one it's obvious, voter intent was one way or the other. They have that power to determine how that vote is counted.
Okay.
Okay. So there was one small precinct that they handed me the results for it, and I was like, well, I'm not going to tell you what the results were from the machine. But I think you should probably look at this one again. It turned out and I had 2 different boards in there. One board was counting the treasurer race, and the other one was counting the value of them both. So the one board recounted that precinct twice and had different results both times. So they passed it off to the other board. They counted it twice, had different results from the previous 2 results.
Okay.
So he hand counted it 4 times, and the results were different every time. And it was a small precinct.
Yeah.
So it just points out that just those differences, and I mean, it's nothing. It's easy for those people to get into a repetitive because I mean, even though you have 4 people, you have 2 people looking at the ballots and 2 people marking hash marks. So you say Bob, Sue, whatever, and somebody's marking these hashes. Well, somebody either forgets to put a hash, or all of a sudden makes an extra hash, or
God forbid, miss one and then get off on all of them.
Just the repetitiveness of it. If you're just counting one small thing all by itself, maybe more accurate. But as you get into the process more and more, it's just it's difficult for people to be as accurate, I guess, as the machine. The machine just says, okay, there's an oval here.
Yeah. And usually doesn't make human error, right? I mean, it's a program, right? Algorithms are in our favor. That's what we should stick to that. So, has there just in more general? Okay, so you said that you wound up being appointed, having to run, and then having to run. Have you ever had anybody run against you?
I did not have any opposition in either election.
And so then, obviously, people think you're doing a good enough job, right?
I hope so. I
think you're doing a great job.
I love my job, and I hopefully people have that opinion.
Yeah, I believe they do. I mean, I honestly do.
I have some people call me and tell me otherwise, but we have discussion, and I appreciate having the discussion.
Well, at least you're there with an open door to listen to what they have to say.
I'm ready to listen or talk about it.
Yeah. I've known you always to be somebody that's overly helpful, and I don't mean that. And I mean, like, just when I interned there, you were always somebody that was there to answer any questions anybody had, and on anything that they had questions.
If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer.
Yeah, and I've been there for that one, right? Just over your time, what has been, in your opinion, one of the most challenging things that you've had to navigate? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, generically, I'd say probably misinformation, mis and disinformation out there, coming from supposed experts that people are taking as being the truth. Which, like I said, if they contact us or me and we can have that discussion, then I'm in favor of getting the truth out there. I mean, just because you hear a rumor about such and such doesn't mean that it's absolutely true. Without getting into a lot of other details. But,
yeah. Well, and it comes back to you're the professional.
I'm a trained election professional. A lot of these other voices out there are people that have theories or whatever.
Or, God forbid, ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And what's the new fancy of the week? I would find that horribly challenging. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you said that, was just thinking, that has got to be a horribly challenging thing. It's almost as though you know a trade well enough to educate and teach people. But a question: how many people would go to school trying to earn a degree and then look at the professor and tell him, "You don't know what you're talking about"?
Right.
Johnny over here told me that this is how this works, so I'm going to believe Johnny, rather than the professor.
And I don't think that it should just be a blind trust, but there should be some trust, I guess. Yeah. I don't know what I don't think I have done anything to dissolve people's trust in me.
No.
But all of a sudden there's people that don't trust me.
Yeah. Well, usually that has
along
to do
with my colleagues.
Yeah. Of course, because you have something to gain out of the deal, right? Yeah. I found most of the time that this takes place, and sadly I'll say it's because of somebody's own ignorance and obstinance to say, I don't know, and it's okay that somebody else knows, and then I'm going to go there and I'm going to find out. If I call you up, Rick, I mean, you're like the go-to man for me, I call you, right? And I ask you a question, and the answer you give me, that's golden. That's like that's the best that I can possibly get. Yeah. I don't need to call anybody else to do that.
And I don't have much of a filter as far as I'm just going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
I just tell you the way it is.
Tell me the way it is. So people, if you have questions about things when it comes to elections or clerk duties, feel free to give Rick a call. He's telling you right now that he will provide you with honest, accurate, and intelligent, informative information. You can't beat that. All right. So, not to hover on the elections deal here, what has been the most enjoyable thing that you've had over the course of your tenure and continuing on?
Don't know. I haven't really thought much about it, but I mean, just the serving the public and knowing that I'm fulfilling a role to ensure that all of their votes, that they can get registered, they can vote, their votes are going to be counted accurately, and that they can trust the results. Now the results may be that, the person was only elected by, half of the people voting, and there was only 20% of the people that are eligible to vote. So, I would argue that sometimes some officials are not elected with an overwhelming majority of the people that actually could vote, but they are, of those that participated, they are getting the most votes of those that participated. Like I said, it's all about ensuring that people can trust the process, and that the people that are elected are the ones that should be elected, because that's what the majority said. We're in a representative democracy, and that's how the system works.
So whether you like the results or not, as long as the results came to be in an ethical and honest way with checks and balances, you're golden.
Yes.
Yeah. And I so as we're coming to the end of the program, Rick, here, just help me understand the why behind who Rick is, right? I mean, I can tell you, just as I personally know you and the time that I've been around you and whatnot, that it's got to be something more than just a paycheck that you get up every day and go to work. I know that a lot of times you are graciously dealing with the public. I've heard it myself. So there's got to be a deeper why. So, I guess, why does Rick enjoy doing what Rick does right now when you wouldn't have to? Obviously, you choose to. Yeah. All the headache, all the new training, everything you do. Why do you do it? I mean, okay, let's go here. I'll even go there here. You're not just our Harvey County Clerk and Elections Officer, right? Official. You are also the chairman for
the chair of the elections committee for the Kansas County Clerks and Election Officials Association, or KCCOA, which is the statewide association of the 109 members, 104 county clerks, and 4 extra election commissioners, which means that I'm the chair of the committee that works with legislative issues related to elections. So especially when the legislature's in session, excuse me, oh, and they introduce a bill that has to do with elections, we look it over and I write testimony and or go testify in front of the committees about, whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, or usually it's not about the politics of it, it's more about the logistics of it. Okay, it's what you're proposing, can we actually make it work? Because as clerks, you pass a law that says we need to do this, we're going to make it happen, like revenue neutral or whatever. We're going to make it happen. Our job is to try and make sure that we can make it happen. You're saying you need to do X, but to get to X, we need to do this, or make this little tweak, or I actively monitor all of the legislation that's introduced and react accordingly based on policies or a platform that's been adopted by the association. And I am actively involved in the association. I'm actually on the executive board at the moment. I'll be president next year. We cycle on up. You start as treasurer and cycle on up. So yes, I'm actively involved in that. I've also, I'm always interested in learning. I think I told you I learn something new every day. When there's opportunities out there to learn something new, I'm on board with it, and encourage my staff to attend different training sessions. There's a new election official certification program that the Secretary of State is offering, and I'll be involved in that. I've actually there's a national group of election officials, and they have a certification program called CERA. It's a Certified Election Registration Associate, I think it is. And that's you have to take 12 1.5-day courses. Well, I'm actually graduating here in a couple of weeks with that certification.
Very cool.
And then I'm involved. I'm on an advisory board with the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, Federal Commission. They have an advisory board that includes 2 members from every state, and I am one of the ones from Kansas. And we had a meeting in D.C. a couple weeks ago, in-person meeting, and we have some online meetings occasionally. It's a brand new advisory council that was created by them, so we're still kind of in the process of determining exactly what our role is, but it'll have to do a lot with helping with best practices for all election officials and operations of elections, how we can make them. Every place is a little different. We're all getting to the same place, but we all do it a little differently, but trying to standardize some of that. So I love the job, and if I can help by being on a federal board or state board or whatever, and put in my 2 cents, and then I'm all for it.
Going above and beyond. I'm telling you, going above and beyond. There's a type of individual that I've come to understand is somebody who not only serves but goes above and beyond in their service, and they're doing it simply because they want to serve. Because I don't know, that's a lot that you take on over and above what your responsibilities are, just to be able to make the situation better for others, to be privy to decisions being made. And that's we have a rock star living here in Harvey County, people. Rick, you're a rock star, I'm telling you right now.
Thank you.
As always, when we come to the end of the program, we give the guest the opportunity to speak directly to the hearts and minds of everyone listening, and you can say whatever you want to say, Rick, about anything you want to say. So
I don't know, I guess all I would do is encourage this. I mean, every year we have an election. We didn't have a primary this year, but multiple school board races and city races will be on the ballot this year. Unfortunately, in odd years like this, where it's local elections, the turnout is pretty low. So I would encourage everybody to get informed about the candidates and come out and vote on November the 7th, or 2 weeks early. We offer everybody multiple ways to vote, so whatever is most convenient for you. But like I said, just get out and vote.
Thank you, Rick.
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming on the program and talking with me. I hope you enjoy the new studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, look around. Well, there you have it, folks, and thanks for listening to this episode of Harvey County Talk. I was your host, Lance Gormley. Good night,